Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard their point. Now, hear the counterpoint on Libertarian Counterpoint podcasts.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We have with us John Cameron, Richard Fields, and the Life Flight helicopter. That'll be gone here in a second. It's, you live next to a hospital, you kind of have to deal with these kind of things. But speaking of hospital needs, crypto crash. It looks like the Biden administration is going to do a surgery on cryptocurrency, so to speak. What do you guys think about that?
Good luck with that. The fact that cryptocurrency is international and pretty much hack-proof, I'm really curious as to how they'll be able to do anything that stops Bitcoin in particular. Now, that said, I think it's possible that they'll make it really, really difficult, make life difficult for people that use cryptocurrencies. But I think you have to get past the excuses that Yellen's offered up, which are that it's only used by criminals and it's used by terrorists, and that old trope, which is largely a false flag. It's just a smokescreen. The reason that Janet Yellen doesn't like cryptos is because it offers an alternative for asset storage to the dollar, which is destined, absolutely, totally, irreversibly destined to lose value given the Biden economic policies, which Yellen is enthusiastically adopting and proposing that be put into place. So the federal government is particularly concerned that people will be able to escape the dollar when they are, in fact, destroying the dollar. They want inflation. They want inflation with a vengeance. They want inflation they've stated they want over 2% inflation. They really want inflation in the 4 or 5% or higher range, simply because that's the only way of managing the federal debt, and they know it. Now, the reason that the effort to hamper crypto will probably fail is because there's a whole lot of people with a whole lot of money and a whole lot of influence on Capitol Hill that want crypto to succeed for the very reasons that the government wants it to fail, which is they want to have a place to store assets securely against inflation.
And I agree with everything Richard just said. It's strange about Yellen. She's always been a politician. Anybody that has that sort of job, the sort of job she's had, are primarily politicians. But she's in what's the word I'm looking for? Enthusiastic favor of programs and ideas that she was absolutely dead set against 10 years ago. And cryptocurrency again. Whenever the government wants to create a policy, what they do is they throw the fear thing out there. You've got, I'm not saying that people aren't dying of the pandemic, but the pandemic allows for an awful lot of stepping all over individual liberties and rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution because of a temporary emergency. They tried it with global warming or climate change or whatever the hell they're calling it nowadays, and that didn't fly. Basically that was thinly disguised socialism. They've tried to float socialism as socialism, and those candidates met with, other than a few safe districts, resounding failure. So this, labeling the cryptocurrency as a way for people to finance terrorist acts is a way to scare people into, if they're still believing that, allowing for regulation of it. The problem is cryptocurrency is cryptocurrency, as Richard pointed out. So I don't know how the hell they're going to regulate it unless they find a way to hack blockchain. And the reason cryptocurrency works and is so valuable now is because you can't hack it. Now, anything created by man can be, any security system can be breached, any computer program can be hacked, and all the rest of that. So, the nice thing about things like cryptocurrencies is that they, smart, good people who see a need create something, and then governments chase after it, trying to destroy it because it increases freedom. And if they manage to crack the current iterations of crypto, then somebody will create even more of one. So we have a double benefit of cryptocurrency. We have improving technology, improving security. Well, that's triple, and money that is pretty much inflation proof. And I've, Richard, you and I remember, and James, I think you remember inflation. Inflation was bad. I remember when we had a head of the Fed with some cojones. Can I say balls on the show? Yeah. Anyway,
You say stones. Yeah.
Stones. I can say stones. Okay. And Jimmy Carter tried to do the same thing with a pittance of the national debt that we have now. And the Volcker, was it Volcker?
Yeah, Paul Volcker.
Paul Volcker
Paul.
said, smoking a cigar and cranked interest rates up to I don't know, try
15%.
15%. I remember selling jumbo CDs with a 17% yield. And I remember people, when interest rates started coming back down, people calling me up begging, crying to get that same rate, and it's gone down 1% in a day. So this is all good. Crypto's good. Government's not going to get at it. And we've got to have checks and balances to those central banks, because they sure are just printing money. Yeah.
Well, the way they'll get at it is they'll tax the living crap out of it when you go to cash it out. And that's the way they'll get it, is ultimately my feeling. So we've talked about freedom a lot there. Switzerland has put a referendum on the ballot to take away the power the government has taken during the coronavirus pandemic, as your panicdemic, as you like to call it there, John. So is the population, the general population, switching gears on this? Are they finally seeing that the government has stepped over their authority?
Switzerland has a really interesting form of government. It's probably the closest thing that we have to a Greek pure democracy, but with lots of limitations on what the government can do. And one of those limitations is their referendum system, which essentially negates the power of Parliament in Switzerland to do whatever Parliament wants to do. And that's what's happened here. Parliament has, not nearly as drastically as the rest of Europe or the United States, but they have initiated crackdown, lockdown initiatives. The people don't like it, and I think they have to get 80,000 or something like that signatures within 100 days to reverse a law of Parliament. They've done it. It's going to referendum, and it looks like I don't know what the polling would suggest, but there's obviously a chance that the good citizens of Switzerland will say, to hell with your lockdowns, Parliament. We are not going to put up with that. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And Richard brought up something, a good point, that yes, Switzerland is very close to a pure democracy, and there are huge protections for individual liberties in the Constitution. Their Constitution's a little less structured, but they're I'm not saying hardcore libertarians, because Switzerland basically is an army. It doesn't have an army. Now, there's a reason that it's not just neutral because everybody benefits from it being neutral. It's neutral and sacrosanct because it'd be a tough nut to crack. And those people value individual liberty, and they just won't give it up. And they know that governments are not, the cream doesn't rise to the top in government, and they know that for sure, and they try to keep government away from out of their pockets. So I think it'll probably pass, even though they've only recently done a lockdown. It said that sending people home, closing non-essential businesses, gathering smaller than 5, because they had a spike only recently. So I think Germany has shown, Germany's more federation of states like the U.S., that people are tired of it, especially when study after study after study comes out saying that lockdowns don't do any good, and they do irreparable harm instead.
Switzerland is a really good example of a country that is doing what government should do in a lot of respects. They are multicultural, multi-ethnicities. They don't have a national language. There is no Swiss language, because there is no Swiss language. It's a mixture of French, Italian, and Germans. And as anybody who has studied history knows, the French, the Italians, and the Germans have been fighting among each other for millennia. But in Switzerland, they all get along. And one of the reasons Switzerland is impervious to outside attack is the fact that it's a mountain republic. But the second reason it's impervious to outside attack is because every adult male, and probably female at this point, is required, not allowed, but required to have a fully automatic weapon at the ready, fully stocked with ammunition in their home. And if anybody tries to invade Switzerland, they're invading, they're fighting not an army, but the entire population, who is very well armed and in a very strong mountain defensive position. I think Switzerland, if you're going to have a government, Switzerland's model is extremely good. And I think they're demonstrating it once again.
Yeah, well, I think you can take the COVID seriously without sacrificing basic human rights and proper roles of government. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, which leads us to our next story. The recession and unemployment, there is looking at it, might cause more deaths than the COVID over time. Over an extent of the next 5 years, you might actually get more deaths from unemployment, suicides, drug overdoses, all the various things that come with this desperation and despair, rather than the 500,000 where we might end up with COVID over the course of the year. And so it's a tragedy.
This is something that we've been preaching, since back last spring, that the lockdown is worse than the virus. What's interesting about this study is that it is done by people at Duke, Harvard Medical School, and Johns Hopkins Business School. We're talking about the elitist institutions of the United States, the Ivy League schools, the most respected among the elites institutions that we have, coming to the obvious conclusion that the lockdown is going to be more lethal than the virus. And they're saying, well, we can mitigate it by all of the public by all of the bailouts and so forth. But the point is that it's the establishment coming to the realization that what they have done is more dangerous than what they are trying to protect us from, supposedly. I think it's it's an extremely interesting development. I suspect that it's going to get very, very little traction in the mainstream media for the simple reason that it violates the popular accepted trope.
Yeah. Well, they came up to the conclusion that was opposite from what they were clearly looking for when they started. And yet they were still, they were scientists enough to say, hey, this is kind of, now they did try to kind of downplay it a little bit, but they were at least scientists enough to say, well, here's what we actually found. And so you got to give them credit for that.
And that what they didn't extrapolate was the long-term, they talked about unemployment and the impact of poverty and all the rest of that. But what they didn't take into account, they didn't reach outside the U.S. when they talked about this. They talked about, I think, was it 1 million lives or 1.5 million lives over 17 years or something like that. They didn't talk about the tens of millions of people who aren't U.S. citizens, the poorest of the poor, because depending on who you look at, the WHO or the World Bank or other think tanks, somewhere between 100 million and 200 million people worldwide have been pushed into poverty where they have less than $2 a day to live on, which is the kind of poverty that kills and shortens lives. So if you add that in, you're probably talking another, over the same 17-year span, they're looking at another 50 million deaths. So, and we know that the deaths attributed to the pandemic virus, or as one place calls it, the CCP virus, the Chinese Communist Party virus, or whatever you want to call it, are inflated, and that the number of cases are deflated because all of the numbers state somewhere between 3 and 10 times as many people have it. And we're not even going to go into the sleight of hand that hospitals and governments are doing, talking about, the numbers. So anyway, it's you talk about, there was another study, Barrington, that came out months and months ago. And these are people from Stanford, Oxford, and Harvard who said flat out that lockdowns are bad. You protect the weakest people who are most at risk and let the rest of the world go about its business. So,
but will the elites listen to science? That is the question.
Well, no, they only listen to the science that they cherry pick.
Yeah, they want to listen to the science they want to listen to. As we came on the air this morning, they just announced that Governor Newsom lifted the stay-at-home order for the whole state just this morning, just as I woke up. So, why? Who knows? They're just making stuff up at this point.
They put up a graph of the downward trend in ICU, and nobody can get the information. You can't even get the information about what processes the state is using to categorize the different tiers. There's no scientific validity to the cherry picking they've done. You can get on an airplane, a little box in the sky with trapped air and fly somewhere, but you can't go to church. You can't have outdoor dining. They're closing national parks because apparently 3 people walking on a trail are going to die from. I mean, it's the least scientific piece of science that's been shoved down the throat of the American people since
global warming.
Hey, since using they used to use radioscopes to put your shoes on, right? To measure your shoes. Back in the old days, they put radioscopes. You stick your foot into a radiation box, and the guy could look down and see and get your shoes properly sized. Of course, they radiated your shoes, and people's foot fell off, and this poor salesman would lose their jaws because they're sitting there around radiation all day long. But hey, we listen to the science.
Well, and if you want to throw out radioactivity, plutonium has this. Let me rant for 30 seconds. 45. Take 45.
All right, here we go.
Supposedly is the most deadly substance on the planet, and one tiny speck of it, an ounce of plutonium would kill 1 billion people. It's all garbage. There was a physicist who said he would sit and eat as much plutonium if Ralph Nader at the time would eat another supposedly innocuous thing that would have killed him on the spot, the same weight. And he said, and I'll be fine, and you're going to die. And Nader would go nowhere near that bet. So science, even though we've turned out some great scientists and a number of wonderful Nobel laureates, we pay no attention to science in this country. 45 seconds.
Well, the desire to do something often leads to greater consequences, which brings us back to California. U-Haul released a study that says California was the least likely place for a one-way U-Haul trip, and we're like 3rd in leaving. I forget exactly where it said we were leaving, but we were high in people leaving the state and very last in people coming to the state.
Yeah, we're in the great company of Illinois and New York in this regard. It's the states with the highest taxes, the most regulation, the most oppressive governments that people leave. People are voting with their feet and going to places that are a lot more friendly government-wise, like Idaho and Texas and Florida and Tennessee, which is number 1 right now.
And what's strange is that Idaho went from number 11 down to number 30. Maybe they finally erected a fence keeping people from California out. But here's a study I'd like to see, and I haven't seen it, because U-Haul is for people of basically limited means, or they're super tight-fisted, or they have strong backs, or a lot of friends. But what I want to see is corporate paid moves, and people have the wherewithal to actually pay a mover to come over. It's people like Richard, the wealthy, who move and have a professional moving service do it. I want to see that number, because I think what you're going to see is that number is through the freaking roof. I don't think it will be even remotely close. That corporations are fleeing in droves, and these are places that when they relocate people, they pay for the move. Military does that, or else you couldn't have a military career, and they've already forced the military out of California, which might be a good thing. So I think if we saw that number, it would be even greater. We know what Elon Musk has moved his headquarters out. He's leaving a factory here. Years and years ago, Intel said it would never add another job in the state of California, and this was like 15 years ago. Like all thieves, California is going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, they're kind of determined to kill the California dream. Don't understand why. But talk about killing dreaming. transit unions are pressuring the Department of Homeland Security to give America a no-ride list. So apparently you can't ride a train or a Greyhound bus if the unions don't want you to.
Or probably the subway. Yeah.
Or the subway. How in the hell is that even going to work? I don't even.
It won't. So, well, the no-fly list is ridiculous. I mean, a monkey could get past the security in an airport. They have, talk about lack of science. The number of containers with 3 ounces in them, I could refresh my chemistry for 20 minutes and come up with a way to go around that to get something deadly on board. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then you put in more infrastructure and all the rest of that. It's like, this is as specious as the LA County Teachers Union in LA County demanding that all children be vaccinated against the coronavirus prior to school reopening. So
yeah, I'm old enough to remember when Cubans would hijack airplanes and say, fly me back to Cuba.
Yeah,
Cuban exiles, whatever. And that was back in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
And nobody panicked. Nobody had an issue. I mean, they would fly to Cuba, drop them off, and fly everybody else home. No big deal. But it was an actual hijacking taking place. Now, because the hijackers are crazy enough to fly into a building, allegedly, we end up with all of these ridiculous laws on how to fly or who can fly an airplane under what conditions. And as you say, the screening process is nothing but kabuki theater. It's meant to make us feel secure. It has nothing to do with actually being more secure. It's relatively easy it would be relatively easy to bypass all of the screening if you wanted to, but it's not happening. And the reason it's not happening is because the threat is really not there. And likewise, the threat on surface transportation is really not there. The people who went to the Capitol, while they were stupid as all get out to supposedly stage an insurrection, it was just a bunch of yahoos, running through the Capitol and putting their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk and saying what heroes we are. They were crazy. It was silly. It was nonsense. But it's going to be used by the Democrats for the next 10 or 15 or more years as an example of a rebellion against the government, which, it may have been at a very, very superficial level, but it was never serious. It never could have been serious. I mean, had they been able to capture the congressman, what would they have done with them? I mean, it's doomed to fail.
They were going to execute them, Richard. That's what the liberals think.
It was just sheer stupidity all the way around.
No, it's stupid. Here, just to talk about the. I didn't mean to interrupt, and I did. Do you want to finish, Richard? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So
I'm just getting myself banned from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter.
Well,
I probably need to stop before I get that far.
Yeah, here's something that I would like you all to do. This is your homework assignment. I know I can't really assign you homework, but you find a good estimate of the crowd size on January. Was it the 6th? And I forget, because Election Day is such a joke. I don't even remember what the day is, or the day that the imperial president's supposed to be, given his throne and scepter. You can't find anywhere. You cannot find. I used 3 or 4 different search engines. I tried DuckDuckGo. You cannot find an accurate crowd number for that crowd. Now, what you'll find is the number of people that were permitted. The permit was for 5,000. They expanded it to 30 or something like that. That was a ton of people when you look at the pictures. You look at those pictures, and counting crowds is a science, and is done all the time. And they have algorithms for it and all the rest of that. But I have spent an hour, maybe half hour, bit-bopping around the web trying to find an accurate number. Out of that, some people say there was 1 million people there. There are some people who were there who say there was 1 million people there. But you can't get a number. Why can't you get a number? Why is that number out there? Because what it will dramatically show is there is an awful lot of people pissed off about that election. Now, let's say there was only 50,000 people there, which would be a small number. A couple hundred of them were stupid enough to be let into that building to cause mischief. The question is, who let them in? The liberals think it was a radical conservative congressman. I think it's part of kabuki theater, because having people getting to take pictures of people with their feet up on Pelosi's desk. I would want to take 3 or 4 showers if I sat in Pelosi's chair and put my feet up on her desk. That's what I'd be concerned with. That's the question. It's going to be interesting to find, and I don't think we'll ever know. So let the theater commence.
Well, it seems to me
go up.
Yeah, it seems to me that whole event shows that we actually don't need to do anything. They ginned themselves up for 2 months, and that's the best they came up with. That's it. They blew their whole...
Yeah, and all of this is not to say that Trump was not soundly defeated. Sure, there was election fraud. There's fraud in every election, but enough fraud to swing the election the other way, highly doubtful. And he was a petulant loser, and probably should be impeached. I would be in favor of his impeachment, but it's kind of after the fact. It's kind of beside the point. The only benefit to his impeachment and being barred from further holding office will be to remove that embarrassment from the Republican Party, and that may or may not be a good thing for the country as a whole.
Yeah, and I think something gets lost in this. I think Trump's an idiot. The fact that he got elected when everybody knew he was an idiot shows how pissed off the country was around the entrenched, we call them the deep state. I don't know what you want to call it, the Beltway bunglers. And he got more of the popular vote than Obama did. So the fact that a few more people voted in the election got him elected. And if you pulled the people, the New York vote and the California vote out, no non-socialist candidate's ever going to win the popular vote in this country, except for if it hadn't been for the pandemic. There is no political expert that wouldn't state categorically that Donald Trump would have won re-election by 15 points. Without the pandemic, he's in office, and he almost was in office with the pandemic, which lets you know that there's still an awful lot of upset people in this country.
Yep. Well, there is an awful lot of upset people because the government fails to work. And we are going to have to leave it at that, Richard. We are out of time.
John Brennan thinks we're terrorists. What can I say?
Yeah, hey, that's what we...
Did you just say we're terrorists? Don't say that when I'm sitting on this panel.
Right at the end of the show. You cannot do that to us. Now I have to extend it. We are out of here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You can catch us at libertariancounterpoint.com, and you can catch all of our podcast episodes over there. Thank you for watching, and good evening.
Goodbye from the peaceful resistance.